Το Business Monitor βρίσκεται στο Fortune Global Forum στο Άμπου. Εδώ όλοι μιλάνε για τεχνητή νοημοσύνη, για την ενεργειακή μετάβαση και για το μέλλον της εργασίας. Με την κάμερα της εκπομπής καταγράφουμε highlights, αλλά και μιλάμε με συμμετέχοντες οι οποίοι μας δίνουν την άποψή τους. Η Toptal είναι ένας από τους μεγάλους partner του Fortune Global Forum. Πρόκειται ίσως για το μεγαλύτερο δίκτυο απομακρυσμένης εργασίας στον κόσμο. Εξυπηρετεί περίπου 20.000 πελάτες σε 140 χώρες. Η συγκεκριμένη εταιρεία δεν είχε ποτέ γραφείο και το σημερινό της γραφείο είναι εδώ στο Fortune Global Forum στο Άμπου. Έχουμε τη χαρά να έχουμε μαζί μας τον CEO και ιδρυτή της εταιρείας, Taso Du Val. Taso, welcome to the Global Forum.
Thank you.
I would like at first to hear your experience from the forum.
Well, it's been a fantastic experience meeting with people in Abu Dhabi and the region in general and getting different perspectives on how folks are viewing remote work, the different initiatives that the different countries in this region have and how they're progressing, and all the different technological efforts that these countries are making to adopt AI and similar things.
You are a keynote speaker here, and you're also watching the sessions. Would you like to share some highlights?
Well, I would say the highlights thus far really do have to do with AI. The region seems to be adopting AI, and they're looking forward to getting advice on how to do that for their organizations. Technology and AI in Silicon Valley, the United States, Europe is a little bit more ahead than it is here, and so I think they're looking for advice, and that seems quite apparent.
Everybody is speaking about AI. Do you think that AI is going to change the future of work, or it's going to unlock the human potential for work?
I think it's going to allow workers that can benefit from AI to do more, and so it'll do a little bit of both. The biggest shakeout from AI thus far, particularly generative AI, is that folks who work in areas that can benefit from leveraging generative AI are becoming much more productive, and the amount of folks who need to be staffed on those types of roles is reduced. So it enables the human potential and it slightly reduces the headcount, but it doesn't do either to an extreme degree like I think a lot of the media makes it out to be.
Do you scare about the AI at all?
No.
No. Okay. So can you describe the main trends for the future of work?
Let's say the biggest trend is I'm not sure I would characterize it as a trend, but one of the biggest themes really is in relation to remote work and where that's going to shake out. There's a lot of conversation about going back to the office. There's also a lot of conversation about not going back to the office. And so there's a bifurcation in terms of companies, because there's some companies who are in one camp and some companies who are in another camp. And it's yet to be seen who's right and where this will all shake out. But I think there's a trend in terms of the conversation around this topic and where the outcome is going to reside and which outcome is going to be the best one.
It's a big debate, and after the pandemic, do you think, Taso, that leaders should still focus on the remote working, and why?
It's my opinion that remote work is the future. You just have to know how to do it well. And what I find is that a lot of the conversation around going back to the office are from companies who seemingly haven't done remote work well. You hear Jamie Dimon talk about going back to the office.
Elon Musk,
but Elon Musk runs 3 companies, Solar City, Tesla, and SpaceX, all which require you to be in the office. You can't build a spaceship remotely, and you can't build a solar panel at your home just yet. But the real crux of that is the operational infrastructure and the working cadence in those organizations and how they've come to reality in order to make working from home effective. I don't see those organizations as thought leaders or leaders in any sense in regard to remote work. The companies that are leaders in remote work, I believe we're one of them, have very robust and resilient infrastructure in regard to how they work. And ideally, we can show those companies that are less robust how to be robust.
Αναστασία, καλησπέρα.
Καλησπέρα Τάσο, εδώ στο Άμπου Ντάμπι όπου πραγματοποιείται το Fortune Global Forum. Μια τεράστια γιορτή με lobbying και networking στο οποίο συναντάμε μερικούς από τους κορυφαίους επιχειρηματικούς ηγέτες εταιριών που βρίσκονται στη λίστα Fortune 500.
Να πούμε σε αυτό το σημείο ότι θα έχουμε την ευκαιρία να ακούσουμε αμέσως μετά δύο εμβληματικές μορφές της δημοσιογραφίας, οι οποίοι συνδέονται άμεσα και με το Fortune Global Brand. Δύο
κορυφαίοι επιχειρηματικοί ηγέτες, αρκεί να τους γκουγκλάρει κάποιος και θα δει ότι για περισσότερες από 4 δεκαετίες ο ένας και για περισσότερες από 3 δεκαετίες ο άλλος έχουν εντρυφήσει στο χώρο αυτού που λέμε επιχειρηματική δημοσιογραφία, είναι βραβευμένοι, για να μην πω πολύ βραβευμένοι, και είναι συγγραφείς κορυφαίων βιβλίων που αποτελούν αυτό που λέμε οδηγό επιβίωσης για τους μεγάλους επιχειρηματικούς ηγέτες. Και αναφέρομαι στον Alan Murray, ο οποίος είναι και ο CEO του Fortune, και στον Geoff Colvin, ο οποίος θεωρείται ένας από τους μεγαλύτερους ίσως γνώστες αυτού που είναι η συζήτηση σήμερα και σε επίπεδο πολιτικό και σε επίπεδο επιχειρηματικό. Τι σημαίνει ηγεσία σε αυτό το εξαιρετικά ασταθές, εξαιρετικά μεταβαλλόμενο και αβέβαιο περιβάλλον.
Σε αυτό εδώ το stage είχαμε τη χαρά να τους φιλοξενήσουμε. Πάμε να δούμε τις συνεντεύξεις.
Hi Alan, thanks for taking the time. We are at the peak of the Fortune Global Forum here in Abu Dhabi, and we are discussing about generative AI, about the future of resources, energy transformation, the future of work. What captured your interest?
You know, I think what this event really highlights is that those issues you're talking about, any one of them is potentially revolutionary, but to have them all happening at the same time is kind of mind-blowing. I mean, you do have this technology revolution that's accelerating. The introduction of generative AI over the last year has really opened up huge new possibilities for business. The energy transformation, again, it may not be going as fast as the UN experts would like it to go, but when you talk to business people, it's a huge transformation that's well underway. And then, of course, the pandemic, but also the geopolitical forces that is forcing companies to rethink their supply chains and their global footprints. And all of those things happening at once create a kind of waterfall of change that I think everyone is sort of trying to get their arms around.
Yes, but how easy is for the companies and for the business leaders to navigate through all these changes?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think they're huge challenges, but what I like about the conversations here is I always leave them hopeful because these are smart, creative business people who take challenges and turn them into opportunities, and they see big opportunities in front of them.
Yes, not only threats, but opportunities.
Every threat
also
is an opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Alan, the world is changing, as you already mentioned, and the world is changing very fast. India, Saudi Arabia, China also, a different USA. Is the whole world in a difficulty to find leadership? The right leadership for these unprecedented days?
It's a really good question. These are unprecedented times. I mean, I've been covering business and the relationship between business and society for 4 decades, and I don't think there's ever been a time where things are moving as rapidly and changing as quickly as they are now. That does require leadership. I think particularly in the political world, leadership seems to be in short supply. And in a sense, that puts a greater burden on business leaders. They are, by definition, practical problem solvers. They wouldn't have gotten to be where they are if they didn't have the ability to address practical problems. And so in a world where you have, in many countries, vacuums of political leadership, business leaders are feeling compelled to step up. That's why, I'm going to spend some time at the COP conversations in Dubai later this week. But really, you see the most interesting actions that are happening on climate happening at the business level, not at the government level. I did a panel earlier today with a representative from Siemens, a representative from Schneider Electric, and a representative from Dow Chemical. And the amount of creative thinking that's going on at all three companies on how to use the technology transformation to create sustainable businesses for the future is both mind-blowing, but also very encouraging. It makes you hopeful about the direction that business leadership can take us.
Yes, and what do you think is on top of the minds of the CEOs today?
Yeah.
The number one, I mean,
Well, we do
challenge.
We do polling on this with the Fortune 500 CEOs, so we have a pretty good idea. I wouldn't say it's one issue, but I think you've already touched on the three big ones. First of all, the pace of change, particularly AI. Generative AI, ChatGPT, it's only a year old. There's never been a technology that invaded the business world as rapidly as generative AI did. So that's one, just the extraordinary new technologies, and how do you make sure that you are on the winning side of that transformation. Two is geopolitical. We see in the polling we do of CEOs that geopolitics is on their mind in a way that it hasn't been probably since
many years.
the Cold War. A lot of thinking about changing supply chains, readjusting supply chains, changing geographical footprints. It's one of the things that makes being here in the Middle East so interesting. You hear lots of stories of companies that have picked up from Hong Kong or from Singapore or even from Russia and the Ukraine and landed here instead. They're working very hard to create a favorable environment for foreign direct investment. And then the third piece is just the huge challenge of the energy transformation and addressing global warming. And I think companies are thinking about that not just because they want to save the world, although who doesn't want to save the world, but they're thinking about it because they think that a lot of companies are going to make a lot of money in the process, that this is a business opportunity to be on the leading edge of the energy transformation. And so companies like the ones I just mentioned are trying to think, how do we get ahead of this so that we end up profiting from the change?
Hi, Geoff. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. You are an expert in investigating the factors that determine success and failure in business and how global leaders are dealing with this bet. So, given the unprecedented risks and opportunities we are facing nowadays, can you share with us your latest observations and thoughts about this topic?
Yeah, there are a few points to make. Of course, it's easy to say that the essence of leadership never changes. It was the same 3,000 years ago as it is today. And to some sense, that's true. But things really have changed. One thing that we've observed is the qualities that a business leader brings are much more human-centered than they used to be. In other words, I can remember when the most valuable qualities that a business leader could have were to be tough. Toughness was very highly valued. And they even competed with each other to see who could be the toughest. It's just not that way anymore. We find that more and more the so-called soft skills, empathy, being able to read someone else's mood or thought, These things are more valuable. And it's people hear that and they say, oh, come on, that's just soft and squishy and sounds good. No, there's research. Companies find that that really distinguishes the best leaders from the rest.
You very often discuss the intersection of leadership and globalization in the context of business and economics. In what way the after the pandemic effects and recent geopolitical turmoil are influencing the dynamics of globalization?
This is a very interesting issue for leaders today, business leaders in particular, because we have entered a new era where business leaders, CEOs in particular, are now expected to make statements and take positions about events in the outside world. So as you mentioned, we've got some, very unfortunate battles going on in Ukraine and in the Middle East. All sorts of other things come up in politics in any country. We never imagined that CEOs would have to make statements on this, would have to take positions.
Something very new.
It is very new, and it's difficult for them. They can get into trouble because they're going to make somebody mad. And yet, largely because of the employees, they do it because they want their employees to understand that this company has certain principles that it sticks with no matter what.
Yes.
And so that's what CEOs are having to do, and it's not easy.
Geoff, companies around the globe are dealing with extraordinary advances in technology, climate threat, volatile geopolitics, economic headwinds, and unpredictable market conditions. How do we make sure that we don't lose sight of the progress leaders have made recently in embracing a more holistic and empathetic, as you already mentioned, approach to leadership?
Look, it's very difficult to keep a focus on that. The nature of humans is that we are more interested in bad news than good news. That's the way we are hardwired. And in a sense, it's good. That helped us survive. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, being more interested in bad stuff than good stuff kept us alive. We survived. So that's the way we are hardwired. The trouble is, some of the media take advantage of that, and they give us nothing but bad news and threats and danger and stuff like that.
Because danger sells.
It sells. And so I always say there are good reasons to be optimistic, but you have to focus on them because the world is not going to tell you about that. But there are great reasons to be optimistic.
Greetings again from the stage of the Fortune Global Forum here in Abu Dhabi. I have the honor and the privilege to be joined together with Parag Khanna. Dr. Parag Khanna is one of the leading experts. He doesn't need many introductions in geopolitics, global policy, and today he spoke on the main stage of the forum on the critical topic of climate change, risk and resilience, and the future of real estate. And I'd say basically nationality, where geolocation, where you choose to live.
That's right.
A critical topic. And can you shed a bit more light about how you approach this equation?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me join you today. This has been a wonderful forum. And what I emphasized, and it's very important to talk about this here on the eve of the COP28 summit, because for a couple of decades now, we have focused more on mitigating climate risk through decarbonization initiatives and less on adaptation. How do we adapt our infrastructure, our real estate, our economies, our populations, and that gap we must overcome. To be clear, by the way, global greenhouse gas emissions have reached 58 gigatons per year, and they are still rising. So yes, we have to put even more effort into decarbonization, but think about the damage that's being done. Hundreds of billions of dollars of insurance premium payouts If we don't adapt our infrastructure, our housing, our transportation, our food, water, energy systems, the damage is just going to continue to multiply. And that's human damage, not just infrastructural damage. So my message is adapt your economies in addition to managing the transition.
And the world is changing. The energy transition is and at the same time, the climate crisis is hitting hard. And from what I deduced from your excellent presentation, some people don't have the option. So we have to think
Right.
of a new geography
Right.
for the real estate
Yeah.
market. And a lot of populations might have to consider changes due to
right.
climate in the next 100 years. And I'm taking a bit to Greece, where I know you visited a few times. We're looking forward to having you more often. For me, a key element is that Greece is reinventing itself with an investment in the Athenian Riviera, growth in the Riviera, and it believes it could be a destination for digital nomads, for
That's right.
silver tourism, and I strongly feel it can do that. And you have an advice, whether it's in the scope, any key takeaway for the Greeks at this stage?
Well, first of all, I see that Greece has taken a technocratic turn, which is, in my estimation, a very good thing, because I'm a technocrat. So I like to see governments that have an expert, orientation, that are backed by data, that are undertaking pragmatic policy. So Greece has been in this process of reinvention. Really, you could take it back a decade, of course, since the financial crisis and the consequences there. So Greece has really experienced an excellent revival, and I think that's a very positive story. Within that, some of the trends you're describing, like the Athenian Riviera and other kinds of economic reforms, clearly we see the in-migration of young people. And a number of these markets that I've studied and written about that are attracting talent, young people, investors, that are deregulating a bit to allow for that foreign investment, that is kicking off a positive cycle. We're seeing it in Greece. So I'm very optimistic about that trend. But to maintain that, you have to factor in a couple of things, and climate resilience is one of them. What Greece has experienced in the last couple of years with wildfires has been absolutely devastating.
Enhances desertification, I understand.
Exactly. So not only the effect on peninsular regions in terms of the impact on agriculture, but also the islands as well. And this really did make global news. Now, it should be a warning. And that means a lot of infrastructure, right? New investment. We have to worry about fire risk and how to mitigate fire risk. We have to worry about irrigation systems for agriculture. There are still, just take a separate topic, huge labor shortages in Greece. So Greece does have to think about not just young talent and digital nomads and software programmers, right? And marketing executives, but laborers too, to really
support the construction,
to support the construction industry and so forth. Everything new that must be built. And in my last book, I actually looked at the tourism sector of Mediterranean economies. And I'm worried about, with the heat effect, right? I know with the Acropolis, they're putting in lights, right? So they can have midnight tours because it's too hot during the day. Even when I was last there, it felt really hot, so all of this is all adaptation. So you and I could think of 1,000 examples of adaptation investments. First of all, I want to say, you need to have started them already. Get started, right? Secondly, it costs a lot, but it will save you money and make you money in the future, because geography is an arbitrage game. You are more or less adapted relative to your neighbors in other countries. So Greece and other countries have to fortify themselves through adaptation so that they become and remain desirable places. And in the age of climate change, we have to continuously nurture those investments.
By means of closing, let's touch a bit on your books. Some of them have let's say, fresh history. Others now count more than 10 years.
20, almost.
20, some of them indeed. And
I'm getting old.
so if we start with a key question of where is the world moving towards, the new geography and the shift, the pivot to Asia, that the future is Asian, how much of this do you see coming into reality now? And how do you think we should position ourselves with this tectonic shifts?
Yeah. It's interesting, so
As
much
Europe,
of
as Greece, feel free to.
I mean, so much of what I write about is considered futurism, but all of it is rooted in the present. So, in fact, the book was called, one of them was called The Future is Asian, but really the present is Asian, right? I mean, most of the human population is Asian. Most of global GDP is Asian. All of the economic growth is in Asia. Infrastructure investment, Asia, right? Super apps and technological innovation everywhere, but also Asia. The argument was not that everyone else will wither. I'm a huge champion of Europe I lived in Germany, as a teenager. So for me, Europe is home. And it's also much more climate resilient than other parts of the world. So my argument was that the world is actually multipolar in ways that are irrevocable. And that was the theme of my first book 20 years ago, was basically saying...
Vindicated because we do now live in a multipolar
right.
era.
Very much so.
After the unipolar moment.
Exactly. So North America is not going anywhere. If you look at North America, you have a population of 500 million people making huge new industrial investments, attracting a lot of European investment because of the subsidies. Europe, there are a lot of people outside of Europe and inside Europe who are pessimists. Again, I'm an optimist about Europe. You have demographics that are actually, there are a lot of migrants coming in, both those that you want and those that you don't want, but you have to harness them and assimilate them. But you have the climate resilience, and definitely you have the forward-leaning adaptation investments that are being publicly supported in Europe and the energy transition and so forth. So I'm still bullish on Europe. And then there's Asia, and within Asia you have multiple engines: China, Japan, India, Southeast Asia, and so forth. So it is definitely going to be a multipolar world for the rest of our lives. But within those three pillars and across them, there will be competition. And there is going to be this investment arbitrage. Where should we be putting our capital? And capital is going to go not just to places that have historically been considered investment grade, because Moody's says so, right? If the country is not also climate resilient, growing in population, attracting talent, diversifying its economy, remaining affordable, those are the filters. Those are the criteria. I have about a checklist of 10. And countries that do all of those things are going to be the winners. And you can, if you had to reduce it to one thing, it does come back to what's happening very well in Greece right now, is that they're attracting young talent.
Did we cover all 10, or do you want to share it with...
I can't give away all the secrets.
Don't give it away.
So,
thanks so much,
you.
Parag.
Thank you,
Thanks
Pablo.
for the great
Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you.
And looking forward to having you in Athens
Lovely.
soon to guide us through all 10.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.